Welcome back, Wolfpack Verlis here, and this is going to be another team breakdown for a team that did make a splash at Worlds, and that is Senior Division World Champion Mark McQuillan's team, mostly because of the Machamp and a couple of other really neat things that the team had. So yeah, this is the Pokemon.com article about it, just kind of gives the breakdown of what the Pokemon had and stuff, and just kind of how it wants to run. Like many trainers, Mark built a strong team around Charizard and Cresselia, but his Cresselia was different from the norm. It knew support moves instead of like trying to set up Calm Mind or do anything like Helping Hand, Moonlight. It had Toxic, Skill Swap, Trick Room, and Ice Beam. Machamp is rarely seen, and it was just a lot of weird on-off meta, as I'd like to say it. It was more like anti-meta that ran meta in an anti-way. Because I mean, we still had Landorus, Therian, we still had Heatran, we still had Cresselia. We had a lot of threats, but almost none of them were run in a standard way, and I'm gonna break that down in a bit. So the biggest thing that did make a splash was the Machamp. That it knew Dynamic Punch, Stone Edge, Knockoff, and Wide Guard. Now here's the thing about these strategy guides. We don't have full in-depth coverage to like every little detail, so I'm just kind of making up the EVs as I see them. Because like with a Trick Room team, it makes it a little more interesting, because it's like, well, there's most likely not going to be too much speed investment on anything, so it's going to be a lot of offense and bulk, and that's what seems what this team accomplished pretty well. So with those kind of situations, I'm just going to kind of make up the EVs and hope they're somewhat accurate, or at least they make sense to what the team is trying to accomplish. Now with Machamp, we had Dynamic Punch, Stone Edge, Knockoff, and Wide Guard. It was just a beastly offensive Machamp. Now you look at Dynamic Punch, cool, that's going to one-shot a Kangaskhan. Look at Stone Edge. Not necessarily going to be the best response for Talonflame in a way, because like it's just going to outspeed you and kill you with a Brave Bird, but at the same time you have Knockoff for damage, you have Stone Edge just for the extra coverage, and you even have Wide Guard. So I mean, if you feel something like an Earthquake coming, you feel a Rock Slide, you feel Blizzard, Heat Wave, anything, you just counter that with the Wide Guard, and then your other Pokemon goes to town or gets free support. And now we can kind of see where all of these different team situations came across, like Cresselia. Toxic, Ice Beam, Trick Room, and Skill Swap. Not a lot of people run Toxic in doubles because it just takes time. Like, if you're running Toxic, and generally in a faster metagame like the one we have right now, you win games quick. You're not expecting Toxic to really do anything, but with this, it was a lot of chip damage in a way, that you Toxic an opponent, that you Ice Beam the other one, you get a little bit of extra damage, and then your Machamp, your Charizard, your other Pokemon finishes them off with that little bit of help from the Toxic damage, because Cresselia really isn't doing too much else. Now the interesting thing is the lack of Moonlight on this Pokemon, and normally you want it to have Sustain, but it looks like Cresselia, it's just meant to be a 100% Trick Room Pokemon. Has Mental Herb. So full tank investment in Mental Herb means that the only thing that's going to stop this is going to be a Fake Out pretty much, and on that it's still tanky enough to probably get through it. So if someone tries to taunt Cresselia down, not going to work, free Trick Room, and now the team goes completely off. And I can kind of see a couple of little synergies and team diversities that I want to break down as well. After that, we have Ice Beam, so that's meant to take out like Landorus and any kind of other things. Garchomp's really popular, Salamence is a popular Pokemon, but Landorus was literally on every team in the top 8 for Masters, and I wonder how many in these seniors. So I mean, that's a Landorus. Also, sorry about the screen being offset, I have it for the Pokemon Showdown. So I mean, that's a Landorus. That's a Landorus. That's going to be a super effective hit on Thundurus. I mean, that's a Landorus. Oh, hey, a team without Landorus. My goodness. That's a Landorus. So, in the top 8, all of these teams, except for one. So, 7 out of 8 teams had Landorus. Ice Beam's just a smart idea at that point. And that's how I was kind of looking at this Cresselia breakdown. So, if we also, you know, Junior Division was the same thing, Landorus, Landorus. Masters was the same thing, Landorus, Landorus. Every once in a while, you'd see a stray Pokemon, but it was pretty consistent on what to expect, which means this Cresselia, great anti-meta, that unless it gets flinched by like a Rock Slide from a Scarf Landorus or something, Trick Room's gonna happen, and then you Ice Beam it, and if they switch, then you Toxic that Pokemon, and it even had Skill Swap. Now I'm trying to figure out what Skill Swap was trying to do, because you can't really Skill Swap Levitate and then expect to do like an Earthquake, but this team didn't run any Earthquake or anything, so it looks like it was mostly just trying to steal good abilities. You see an opposing Sylveon, you steal that Pixelate. You see an opponent Kangaskhan, that you try to steal that if Machamp isn't able to finish off the Kangaskhan immediately. That it seems like there's also a lot of high predictive play needed with this, that you need to know when your opponent's going to protect, so that way you just kind of disrupt the other one, and then when the other Pokemon can't protect, then you go and get the win. But at least this team was somewhat diverse compared to all the other things that we've seen. You know, ran Heatran and Landorus, but the rest of it does have some good synergies, and it was really interesting to kind of figure out. So Charizard's also interesting. Heat Wave, Solar Beam, Flamethrower, that's it. And it was also a modest nature. So it just shows that this team doesn't want to be fast in any way. Then maybe you just have like Charizard as a standard kind of sweeper, but you're not looking to overwhelm anything with speed, that you're just looking for the higher damage options here. So Heat Wave, Solar Beam, Flamethrower, and Protect, you make the outplay, you go for damage, something like that. But then Heatran. Heatran was pretty much the same thing. Heat Wave, Flamethrower, Solar Beam, Protect with a Shuca Berry. That way it can survive an Earthquake after the split damage. And since it was a modest nature, I was thinking, well, it probably had like the modest investment, but at the same time, Machamp had an adamant nature. So they weren't quiet natures, or they weren't brave natures, so they weren't synergizing with the Trick Room 100% of the time, but they were still like probably not speedily invested, so they did work well enough with the Trick Room. So that was one of the confusing things I was trying to break down. But at the same time, when you look at it, there's not a lot of damage diversity here. Heat Wave, Flamethrower. Heat Wave, Flamethrower. So what this team did was it only focused on the meta, and this is what I mean why it was like an anti-meta that ran with the meta. Because in a diverse meta, you couldn't really risk running 2 Pokemon with literally the same moveset. That there's just damage and speed changes here. So I mean, if there was something heavy in the meta that was resisting fire really well, unfortunately there isn't. You just blow everything up at this rate. Then there could have been some issues, but since it ran against the meta in that proper way, you can run these high damage fire moves, and there was really nothing to oppose it. That you get past the first couple rounds if there was anything fishy with like a Machamp silliness, and it could work out, you know, Cresselia. Cresselia's going to set up that Trick Room. Machamp can throw out the Dynamic Punch or go for the knockoff or just Wide Guard to play safe for that turn. And then after that, Dynamic Punches, the opponent's confused before they attack while also taking serious damage. That can work out pretty well. Also, I do like the Citrus Berry on the Machamp. Now, I've been running tanky Citrus Berry Machamp, and I've been talking about it as a support in doubles, so I'm really happy to see this Pokemon getting first place at Worlds. That's actually really, really awesome. I saw it support, and it actually worked out pretty well. It's also like a high damage in a supportive way. It's kind of crazy like that. So then we have Heatran, we had pretty much talked about that, and then Sylveon. Sylveon was also an interesting set because it had Hyper Voice Moonblast. It was just layering the damage that pretty much it was either go for double target or do a huge single damage target, because in doubles, when you hit both opponents with the same move, it actually reduces the damage by 25% to 75%. So I mean, it's like, oh man, Hyper Voice won't KO, but Moonblast will, because it's just that single high damage. So that was pretty much what I saw with this team. That was kind of the big thing. And then Shadow Ball. I would guess that was mostly just like, oh, that guy's going to run like a Perish Gengar or something, or a Mega Gengar. You blow it up with the Shadow Ball, and then you're good to go, because you first turn Protect, you set up the Trick Room, you outplay the Gengar with the Shadow Ball, because Sylveon doesn't run Shadow Ball that often, and then you get your outplays from there, so that's probably a thing. And other than that, you know, still not a lot of diversity. That we have Fire Grass, we have Fairy and Ghost, and then we just have Ice, and there's a decent amount of coverage on the Machamp. Other than that, you know, it's just kind of really the same things over and over. And normally people would call that bad, but at the same time, it worked well because that's what the meta called for. So this is why I also applaud it for its like team building uniqueness. That it didn't really, it just went for what it needed to. It wasn't looking at the broad picture, and in a way that can work. That it, like at Worlds, you're expecting kind of fairly consistent teams. So that was one plus side I noticed. The only thing I find weird is a Pixie Plate, but at the same time, you know, normally I condemn the usage of any kind of plates because it's only a 20% for one move. But when you're using 2 of the same move, like over half of this Sylveon's offensive moveset is a Pixie Plate. So nothing else really makes sense on this specific moveset, even though I'm still not a fan of plates in generals, and that just because it won at Worlds doesn't make it completely viable. But situationally, it worked out in this case, because you're not Life Orbing for extra damage on yourself, and you're not really needing any more damage than 30%, because Pixelate, Pixie Plate, super craziness on that Hyper Voice, and that's kind of more than enough. So I guess that's something to consider. Also, the things here, that the opponent, if they have a Wide Guard, you get to use your single target instead of being locked into a double target. So that's something I just picked up on that. On that, I can only guess that everything was like hit point invested, or specifically defense invested. Like, maybe this Heatran had a set to survive certain Garchomps or certain Earthquakes. That way it had enough defensive investment that survives with the Shuca Berry and then blows things up from there. Maybe same with all of these sets, that was more precision damage calculation. But because of the Trick Room, you really can't see it as anything other than that. That's where Landorus comes in. 91 base speed with Max. Not a lot, but at the same time, you're running a Mega Charizard, so that might have just been speed with a Landorus, just enough speed for specific things. But this wasn't your standard Landorus. The most popular thing on a Landorus is going to be Choice Scarf. This was Assault Vest. Not too many Landorus run Assault Vest. Something like 12%, maybe 10%. It's like 1 in 10 Landorus that you'll encounter on the battle spot have this. But at Worlds, it did well because it was meant to just absorb. Maybe there was special defense investment, now I'm thinking about it. It's meant to absorb that Ice Beam and then go and blow up the Pokemon that tried to knock it out with an Ice Beam with like an Earthquake or something. Also with Landorus, you tend to see more speedy natures with the Scarf. With this, it's the max 145 power. You're going for that raw damage on the Adamant nature, you have U-turn for your out against things, you have Rock Slide, and then you have Super Power. So really, you know, there's just a lot of damage options here and a lot of synergies with the team, because I mean, almost everything has Protect or Levitate, except for Machamp, but Wide Guard actually keeps you safe from your own Earthquake, so Landorus Earthquakes freely, and that works out pretty well. It's also why I don't see Cresselia skill swapping the Levitate unless it's super strategic, and I think that that's actually where this team came in. So my guess here is that Sylveon Landorus is actually the core, and then what you open with is depending on what you see with your opponent. If your opponent doesn't have any way of stopping fire, then you just open Mega Charizard Y and Heatran. If there isn't too much ground threat or anything like that, you just go and blow them up. Then you go into Sylveon and Therian Landorus for the finish off. But if you see a team that you want to kind of slow down and disrupt with the Machamp Cresselia, then you lead that. But in that, it seems like Sylveon's the core, and these are your two situations. Which is a pretty interesting team concept, that it's pretty much everything is like teching into any kind of potential, which is what made it work. That this won Worlds for a reason. I'm pretty sure that that's actually it. That it was diverse, it ran off-meta sets with meta Pokemon to counter the meta in a very unconventional way. That you look at this team, and I think that most people would just kind of, on the surface go, wow, this is a really bad team. I mean, why do you have so much synergy here? Pixie Plate, Shadow Ball, Sylvia? Whatever, but I mean, because he read the situation, he got first at World. So this is the kind of team building I applaud, and that's why I was really happy to do a team building breakdown on this. So yeah, the Machamp, always pretty hype. Everyone used Landorus. That's a thing, it's just too good. Can't really condemn him for that. Heatran worked in this situation with the synergy on Charizard, and everything else was, yeah, it was just the right way to run the team. So I'm really excited for that. Hope you guys enjoyed this team breakdown, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.